The house was packed and loud. Disciples sat shoulder to shoulder with tax collectors, while swindlers, prostitutes, and social outcasts shared heavy cups of wine and passed plates of food. Standing at a distance, the Pharisees watched from the street. They refused to enter the house, maintaining a physical gap to ensure they didn't accidentally touch anyone or anything that might compromise their ritual purity. They directed their questions to the disciples, asking why a man they called teacher would choose to spend his evening in the company of people society had collectively rejected. In first-century Judea, this wasn't an issue of social etiquette. To the religious elite, holiness was defined by separation, and by entering this house, Jesus was choosing to involve himself in the ritual impurity of everyone inside. The host of the party, Levi, later known as Matthew, made his living at a customs booth along the trade routes of Capernaum. He controlled the flow of goods moving from these agricultural fields toward the Sea of Galilee. This is a silver denarius, the currency of the Roman occupiers. Matthew's job was to collect these coins from his own people, often inflating the tax to keep a percentage of the profit for himself. This profit cost him total social isolation. His neighbors viewed him as a collaborator with Rome, and after years of being treated as a traitor, Matthew eventually adopted the identity they gave him, the rich, hated outcast who no longer expected to be welcome in the synagogue. He had reached a point where he stopped seeking the respect of his community. By trading his reputation for financial security, he had accepted a life where his only value was the silver in his money box. One morning, Matthew was at his usual post, surrounded by tax records and the daily revenue he'd collected from those traveling the road. Jesus of Nazareth walked up to the booth. Matthew likely prepared for the standard reaction, the look of disgust or the wide step to avoid him. Instead, Jesus stopped and looked directly at him. He didn't look at the money box or the ledgers. He looked at the man behind the table, acknowledging him with a level of attention usually reserved for friends or students. For the first time in years, Matthew wasn't being treated as a category of sinner or a political traitor. This was a direct, human-to-human acknowledgement that bypassed his public reputation entirely. This diagram represents the traditional religious path, a steep staircase of restitution and behavioral reform. But Jesus bypassed that entire climb, simply saying, "Follow me." The usual requirements disappeared. He offered Matthew an immediate place in his inner circle before a single coin had been repaid. Matthew stood up. He left the money, the booth, and the guaranteed imperial income behind, walking away from the only security he had left. He was trading a profitable identity for an uncertain future, following the man who offered him a way to be something other than the traitor he had been for years. Back at the dinner party, Jesus heard the Pharisees questioning his choice of company and addressed their complaints directly. He used a simple analogy. Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. I came not to call the righteous, but sinners. The Pharisees believed they were the healthy ones because they'd followed every rule, using their external behavior to signal they didn't need any help, effectively disqualifying themselves from the very doctor standing in front of them. The tax collectors and outcasts at the table had no illusions about their condition. Because they already knew they were broken, they were the only ones in the room ready to accept the cure Jesus was offering. The man who once used his literacy to record tax yields eventually used those same skills to write the first gospel. The collaborator became an apostle, recording the teachings of the rabbi who had called him from the booth. We all have our own version of the customs booth, the specific failures or parts of our history that we assume disqualify us from being seen as anything other than broken. But the physician doesn't require you to heal yourself before the appointment. He meets people exactly where they are, regardless of how much restitution they still owe or how many rules they've broken. No past is so stained that it prevents this same invitation. It only requires the willingness to hear the call and start walking.